Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and today we got another article from Vanity Fair all about Star Wars. This seems to be an expansion of the, same type of interviews that they did a while ago, but we actually have a lot more context than we did yesterday, which is good because yesterday, if you saw that video, we needed some context around some very specific parts. Unfortunately, it looks like, the limited amount of free articles they let you read, you gotta subscribe and all this. I'm not gonna bother doing all that, but I did actually manage to capture a bunch of screenshots back when I read this on my phone. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. And to start off with, we're gonna talk about some actual, here are the Alden comments that, like I said, are now infamous at this point. Kathleen Kennedy's comments about Alden and how all this happened with Solo and everything. So let's go ahead and let's see what they say. Okay, so here's the interviewer talking to her, and it says, "I don't want to put you in an awkward spot, but this was an understanding you've come to that was developed from Solo," and he's responding to something she had said earlier in the article, saying how she's come to the understanding that they can't have Luke Skywalker without Mark Hamill. And here's their question. "I don't want to trash Alden Ehrenreich. I think he did a good job. But the idea that you can't really replace Luke Skywalker, was that something you learned from that movie, or how would you put it?" And here's what Kathleen Kennedy says. She says, "Maybe, as you say it, Anthony." Anthony Bresnikan is the person interviewing her, by the way. "Maybe. I think back, and Solo was one of the first ideas that came up when the company was sold. One of the first people I went to was Larry Kasdan. Larry and I have known each other forever. He was so excited to tell that story. We genuinely believed at the time it was a good idea." Which, yeah, by the way, Larry Kasdan, famously, he wrote Empire Strikes Back, right? So, or he wrote it with George Lucas, obviously. But yeah, so this was Solo was one of those movies that felt very much like a project that, it felt like something George Lucas actually would have done at some point. Anyways, she goes on to say, "So yeah, there should be moments along the way when you learn things," which is one of the quotes we heard yesterday, "that may have certainly been a learning moment. Some people have talked about how, well, maybe Solo should have been a TV show, but even doing Solo as a TV show without Harrison Ford as Han Solo, it's the same thinking. Maybe I should have recognized this before. We would never make Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford, having just finished the 5th movie," which, by the way, I'm sure we're going to get that trailer very soon, by the way. "I can tell you there wasn't a day I wasn't on set where I wasn't like, yes, this is Indiana Jones." So yeah, basically what we're learning with the further context and more quotes from Kathleen Kennedy is that, yes, she believes now that, what she didn't believe then is that you can't really capture Han Solo or Luke Skywalker without the original actors involved in some capacity, even if it comes down to other actors doing the body and using a bunch of deepfake technology. So I know not everyone's going to be happy to hear that, okay? A lot of people loved Alden and the work that he did, but this definitely seems to be the lesson that Kathleen Kennedy took away from Solo, is that it just didn't capture Han Solo, and she's not necessarily blaming the failure, the box office failure of that movie on that alone, but it does seem to be one of the lessons that she learned, was that she would have rather have been able to use Harrison Ford. So there you go. That seems to be the end of it. I know there was a lot of people kind of going back and forth and discussing what did she actually mean by that, because we were missing so much context. But yeah, that seems to be all the context in the world that you need right there. So okay, we're gonna move on. So here we go. This is about Rey potentially being a Kenobi. So here we go. Again, this is the interviewer saying, "I'd heard that Obi-Wan was possibly one of the resolutions, that Rey could have been a descendant of his. I've heard that this idea was carried along for a while, when it was put aside partly because Rian Johnson had a different approach, but also because Lucasfilm didn't want to tie up Obi-Wan for a different story down the line. Is that about right?" And she says, "The bigger issue is talking about Obi-Wan as a master Jedi and the issue of attachment and selflessness. In order for Obi-Wan to have a child, you really impacting the rules around the Jedi. What does that mean? If that were explored, and certainly there were a lot of ideas being thrown around, but anything to do with Obi-Wan in that regard was pretty much off the table because it flies in the face of everything George created in the mythology. We're not rigid about it. It's certainly open for discussion all the time, but that's a pretty significant tenet in the mythology of the Jedi that we'd be reluctant to mess with. So yeah, she's essentially saying that, like, because, you know, attachment and, you know, Obi-Wan would not have a secret love child out there somewhere, which, you know, another thing, there is sort of this fan theory that Obi-Wan and Satine had, what's his name, Corky was introduced as like her nephew or something, but everyone's like, oh, maybe that's actually Obi-Wan's kid, you know, and that's like a popular fan theory. But Kathleen Kennedy's essentially shutting that down, saying like, no, we wouldn't mess with that. Obi-Wan didn't have a kid, kind of thing. So there you go, there's that. And here's them talking about the Skywalker saga. They say how important is it to get outside the gravity of the Skywalker saga, moving beyond the characters we know? How vital is it to open up those new realms? Which, you know, by the way, I've heard a lot of people, you know, kind of talk about that. It's like, hey, can we move on? Can we leave the gravity of these 6 movies? Here's what she says. I think it is vital just staying within the construct of George's storytelling. To keep chipping away at that, I think, would be wrong. It's our job to step away now, but still have a connection to the mythology that George created. That won't stop. But we are moving on from the Skywalker saga. That's what's taking a lot of time, discussion, and thought right now. So yeah, basically she's saying like that is the goal, is to leave away. It's interesting that she said they don't want to keep chipping away at it, because I mean, you know, the more that we give these in-between stories, like the upcoming Obi-Wan series, I don't know if that's what she means by like, there, you know, we're filling in all these little gaps that George never planned on filling in, you know, but we're getting like what happened in between these 2 movies, what happened right before this movie, you know. But it is good to hear that they are like taking their time and they're like thinking about how to move away from this Skywalker saga while still like being in the universe, you know. So that's good. Let's see, here we go. So here we're talking about the movie side of things. Can we touch upon storytelling classic, the movies? I know about Taika Waititi's untitled film written by Krysty Wilson, Carnes, I don't know. And Patty Jenkins is doing Rogue Squadron. Do you have a roadmap for features, or are you still developing that? By the way, Kathleen Kennedy continuously calls movies features, like feature films. I don't know why she calls them features, but anyways. She says, we have a roadmap. I would say that Taika's story fits more specifically into that. So right away, that's an interesting piece of information. So Taika's movie, which right now, again, according to yesterday, is rumored to come first, that movie is more tied into whatever this roadmap, whatever like this backbone of the future that they're creating. That's more involved with that. She says, Rogue Squadron, we kind of push that off to the side for the moment. Patty is developing the script further. Then we will talk about how that connects to the central spine that we're working on. So that's again, that's interesting, is that like, you know, we've heard about these troubles with Rogue Squadron, but she's saying that like they're going back to the script. We're reworking it. So I guess they just didn't quite like where the script was when they were supposed to start production on that movie. And also, you know, like I said, I want them to take their time and create a roadmap and have like a definite idea of at least like how are their upcoming projects going to connect to each other and what the future is, you know, what does it look like, you know. And it seems that at least right now Rogue Squadron just was such an individual, you know, movie that didn't really have anything to do with the whole future connection that they're trying to build. So that's interesting, because, you know, she's talking about like even after they develop the script, they're gonna have to talk about like how it fits in, you know, like how does this fit in with everything else they're doing. So that's, I don't know, Rogue Squadron I think is still very much up in the air. They're still developing the script, but I don't know, I would say its future is still kind of questionable based off these comments. She says, there's a couple of filmmakers that we've been in conversation with over quite a long period of time that I'm hoping will come in and make the overall commitment that John and Dave have made. That's ideally what I would love to see happen in the feature space. So yeah, earlier in the article, she had talked about how John and Dave are working on the on the streaming TV side, and she wants someone to come in on the movie side. You know, again, she calls them features. She wants someone to come in on the movie side and have that same commitment where they're like, yeah, I'll stay here for 4, 5, 6 years. Here, I think the next part even talks about that. So here we go. And this is Kathleen Kennedy talking. So there's a little bit of luck that comes into this too. With Jon Favreau and the TV side, we've gotten very fortunate that he's made the long-term commitment. I would love to find someone on the feature side that would make that kind of long-term commitment. There's a couple of people I'm pretty close to that we may get there, but it's such a competitive landscape right now that availability, exclusivity, those kinds of ideas make it tough. And they go on to ask, are you talking about a commitment to make, say, 3 movies, or are you talking about an even bigger commitment of shepherding phases of films in the way that Kevin Feige did with Marvel? And she says, I wouldn't go so far. Kevin is an anomaly, an amazing one, but the goal is definitely having someone make more of a commitment. I hesitate to use the word trilogies anymore because Star Wars is much more about persistent storytelling. And later on in the article, she went on to talk about how, like, you know, she mentioned basically the idea of like interactive storytelling, of like, you know, kind of VR, social media type stuff. Basically, the idea is that like they want Star Wars to be in this place where it's not just about like, okay, come on and make 3 movies for us, but they want it to be where it's like, all right, look at the next 6, 7, 8 years, and don't just look at movies, but you know, look at the video games and look at the type of products we're putting out, like interactive experiences, you know, like how can this all, you know, like persistent storytelling, you know, like what she said here. So she's definitely looking for someone to come in and like really commit, like be the Star Wars person. And she mentions that John and Dave are those people on the TV side, and I think that's probably for the best. Like, I know a lot of people out there want John and Dave to make the movies, but I think if they were tried to do the movies and the streaming series, one of those would start to suffer, you know. So they have Mandalorian and Boba Fett and Ahsoka and oh, I'm missing one. Anyways, my point is they have all these different shows that they're working on and they're collaborating with, and they're even producers on some of the ones that they're not directly writing. I think it's good for them to focus all of their energy here, you know. Plus it helps with like their style of storytelling. They don't have to condense everything to 2.5 hours. They can make it a 6-episode thing. Anyways, so and then here we go. Rian Johnson's still in the conversation. Now this is something else that was pretty interesting from yesterday. Here's what she says. Rian has been unbelievably busy with Knives Out and the deal that he made at Netflix for multiple movies. So that's what we heard yesterday. And then she continues on to say, I've had meetings with Rian. He's somebody that's come in as a part of our little brain trust discussions along the way. He remains very committed to what it is we're trying to do. He just literally hasn't had the time to devote. Okay, so that's very interesting. So this is not a case where they're like, oh, we're gonna say that Ryan's busy, but really nothing's happening. No, she is saying that Rian Johnson has consistently been talking to them. He's part of their conversations. You know, he hasn't had time to like commit to this big 5-6 year plan, but he's in the discussion. You know, he's part of, you know, he's in their group chats, you know what I mean? So anyone who has like this idea that Rian Johnson's just not a part of Star Wars right now, that does not seem to be the case at all. He seems very much attached to the group of what's happening, and that's fascinating. I know that's gonna like piss some people off, but that's kind of fascinating, to be honest. Here we go. She says, he literally hasn't had the time to devote. That's what I'm saying. Anyone who comes into the Star Wars universe needs to know that it's a 3, 4, 5 year commitment. That's what it takes. You can't step in for a year and shoot something and then walk away. It just doesn't work that way. So it requires that kind of nurturing. So it's interesting here that like we're seeing parts of the quotes that we heard yesterday, but now that we have the full quote, we're actually getting so much more information. But yeah, it seems that like Ryan's busy with his whole Netflix deal, so he can't really come in and just do these movies, which, you know, I think that's fair to Ryan, right? Because probably when he agreed to the Netflix deal, Lucasfilm probably just had no idea what they were doing next, you know, and he's not going to sit around for 2 or 3 years and wait for them to figure it out. You know, he's got to do his own career, you know. So obviously he signed the Netflix deal, and now he's still part of their conversation, and that's pretty fascinating. But yeah, they're definitely like, they're looking for someone who, like, right now, and maybe Taika Waititi's gonna end up being that guy, because you know, they said that his movie is the one that's like the next thing that's actually part of what they're building. So maybe he'll end up being the guy who's like, all right, I'll be here for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And here's another piece of information that I think is very worth mentioning here. She says, I mentioned Kevin Feige before, and I know he's been reported he's producing something. Can you tell me more about that? And then she said, that's the rumor mill. I think everyone knows he's a huge Star Wars fan. He's clearly been inspired by Star Wars and the way in which he's handled Marvel. I know he's got a lot on his plate. I would love to see at some point what movie he might come up with. But right now, no, there isn't anything specifically on the horizon. And then they updated this. This is Vanity Fair updated this, saying, this interview with Kennedy was in March. And last week, screenwriter Michael Waldron told Variety he was working on a script for the rumored Feige project. So, you know, like I mentioned this yesterday, that it was weird for her to deny that. Now we know why they denied that. Okay, this was 2 months ago. So all the words that you heard me say was Kathleen Kennedy saying this 2 months ago. Okay, so that's also very important. So it's possible that, like, you know, especially because Thor: Love and Thunder is essentially wrapping up, is, you know, basically in post production. I would say it's very possible that Waititi has come in and is now going to be their Star Wars guy on the movie side of things. I'd say that's very possible. And you know, Rian Johnson is still in the middle of his Knives Out thing. I think he still has to, you know, like I said yesterday, he's still, I think number 2 is done filming, but he's writing number 3, or they're going to start number 3. So that's, you know, he's still got a while to go there. But yeah, that's essentially where they're at on the movie side of things. Kevin Feige is absolutely working on something. Obviously he's doing Marvel, so I don't think he's going to come in and be the guy, because I don't see him leaving Marvel anytime soon. But yeah, a lot of interesting context to stuff that we didn't have yesterday. You know, a lot of new information, and you know, I'm assuming that all of these articles are going to be in the same issue of Vanity Fair, the same like Star Wars issue. So I am curious if they end up releasing another article tomorrow with even further context. But in any case, this was some fascinating stuff. Rian Johnson, he's still very much in the conversation, guys. And that's what's kind of fascinating, because like a lot of you, you know, I was beginning to doubt if this, you know, because it's been what, 4 years since they were like, oh, he's making 3 movies, right? Like, it's been so long and they haven't said anything. And every once in a while we would get a little quote, a little tidbit from Rian Johnson saying like, oh, I'm still waiting. And it's like, a lot of us were like, yeah, okay, I mean, it's been years and we haven't heard anything official, so we'll see if that happens. But now that we're getting like such an open look at what's going on, which, another thing, this is like the most honest and the most open I think Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy have been in years. You know, like it feels like we haven't gotten this level of connection with them in a long time. It's kind of refreshing, you know. But yeah, Rian Johnson still hanging around. He's not going anywhere. You know, they seem to have a really good relationship with him. So no matter how you may or may not feel about Rian Johnson, that has not impacted his relationship with Lucasfilm, it seems. Pretty interesting. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you feel about this this new report. How do you feel about them trying to leave the Skywalker saga? I mean, I feel like we knew that. Let me know how you feel about her, you know, more context around those Alden comments. I know not everyone's going to be happy about that. And just, you know, what about Obi-Wan not having a kid? Because maybe that goes against what George Lucas, you know, set up, you know, and she doesn't want to do that. You know, I know a lot of people out there have feelings about Kathleen Kennedy and have feelings about how, you know, they might have treated George's story and George's mythology. But I mean, she's saying here that she specifically, that was the reason she didn't want Rey to be Obi-Wan's child, was because she felt that would go against George's story. So that's interesting. You know, I just, we're getting a little window into Kathleen Kennedy's mind here, and there's just some interesting stuff here. So yeah, let me know how you guys feel. Let me know what you think. Let me know your opinions. And honestly, I'm kind of hoping we get even more stuff from all these interviews, because it looks like over the last couple months, Vanity Fair has just done so many interviews. So I'm sure we're gonna get more. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.